Okay, so let's assume we have a real actor portraying a fictional character. We often see that in movies or TV shows. Maybe we have a fictional character being portrayed by a purely imaginary creation. What happens if we put them together? Well, sometimes we have a show like this, where we have some real humans portraying some of the fictional characters, but then some of the fictional characters might be, hand-drawn animation. They might be computer-generated animation, or in the case of Sesame Street, they could be, Muppets made primarily out of fabric. So that's how complex numbers work, right? I'm going to take real numbers. I'm going to combine them with imaginary numbers, and I get complex numbers. Right? So this is kind of like, hey, if I'm going to have a show, and I know everybody's going to be fictional, but maybe I want some, real life humans acting some of the parts, and maybe I want some computer generated animations doing some of the fictional parts. So real numbers, you know what they look like: 8, pi, 4 over 13, negative 19.82. And you learned what imaginary numbers look like: I, 5i, 3/4 I, negative 6.3i. So to be a complex number, they look like this: 7 plus I. That's a complex number. 3 minus 4i. That's another one. 1/2 plus 8.2i. Negative 6 plus square root of 7 over 3i. Right? Those are complex numbers. Complex numbers have a real number followed by a plus or sometimes a subtraction symbol, and then an imaginary number. Right? So b can be negative. If you look at one of my complex numbers, I've got 3 minus 4i. However, a and b cannot be 0, because if one of them is 0, it's no longer a complex number. It's just imaginary or real. So let's take a look at adding and subtracting some complex numbers. Here are two complex numbers. Let's add them. Here comes the answer. You ready? Can you figure out where that answer came from? 6 plus 2 made the 8. 4i plus 3i made the 7i. I'm going to start with those same two complex numbers, but I'm going to subtract them this time. Ready for the answer? Where did that come from? 6 subtract 2 is 4. 4i subtract 3i is 1i. But of course, I'm not going to put 1i. I'm just going to put I. Here come two more complex numbers. Why don't you try add them? Stop the video, get an answer, start the video up again. Okay, I got 6 plus 5i. 4 plus 2 is 6. 7i plus negative 2i is 5i. Same situation. Why don't you try to do this one on your own? Stop the video while you do it. Start the video when you're ready. Well, 2 subtract 4 is negative 2. 7i subtract negative 2i makes a positive 9i. Let's try multiplying. Those are two complex numbers. So let's multiply them. I will have to perform FOIL. F, first one in each. O, outer. I go toward the outer parentheses. I, inner. Go toward the inside parentheses. Now here comes the one that's a little bit tricky. Last, I got to take the 4i, multiply it by the 3i. Now, of course, 4 times 3 is 12, but I times I is I squared. Now, it looks like O and I combine, right? 18i plus 8i becomes 26i. But we're not done. I squared is secretly -1. So that is 12 times -1 for the third term. Kind of interesting. The positive 12 and the negative 12 cancel out. Doesn't happen too often, but sometimes it's like, hey, guess what? We just end up with either a real number or an imaginary number. Here come two more complex numbers. And again, you might want to try multiply this out yourself and get an answer, so you could pause the video now and then start the video when you have an answer. Okay, I'm going to do FOIL. 2 times 4, of course, is 8. 2 times 2 is 4, but there's also a negative symbol, and there's also an I, so -4i. 7 times 4 is 28, but I've got a positive symbol, and I've got an I, so it's plus 28i. Positive 7 times -2 would be -14, but there's also an I times I, so I get -14i squared. -4i plus 28i combined to be 24i. However, I am not done. I squared is -1. -14 times -1 is positive 14. And that will simplify, and I get 26 plus 26i. One more example each, and then you can start working on the worksheet. I recommend that after you get all the questions up here, that you can pause the video, try to get the answers to all 3 of these, and then after you get the answers, you can start the video up again and check your work. Okay, that's what I got for the adding. 8 plus 7 is 15. -13i plus 4i is -9i. What did I get for subtraction? Oh, there's my answer. 4 subtract 17 is -13. 3i subtract 4i is -1i. Of course, I'm not going to put the 1, right? If it's -1i, I'm just going to put -i. For multiplication, 7 times 2 is 14. 7 times -5i will be -35i. -3i times 2 is -6i. -3 times -5 would be a positive 15, but there's also an I times I, so it's positive 15i squared. Combine like terms. -35i, -6i, combine to be -41i. Uh-oh, I squared. I can trade that for -1. So I really have a -15 for the third term. 14 subtract 15 is -1, so I end up with -1 subtract 41i. There's the answer. All these will be available for download without animation if you want to look at them. And going on with the theme that, a complex number is when we take a real number and combine it with an imaginary number, right? These are all fictional characters. Some are being portrayed by, real human actors. Some of them are just models or Muppets, or in the case of Big Bird, I think you got a person walking around inside a gigantic costume there. But you've got a worksheet that you can work on, and then we'll check in next time.